Hello everybody and welcome back to Picked at Dawn's YouTube channel. I apologise in advance for me squinting at the camera today, but it is a good thing because it means that the sun's out, yay! So it makes a change from the last couple of weeks. We've actually got sunshine, but that means that if I stand on that side of the polytunnel, I'm beautifully backlit and quite happy, but you can't see anything that I'm holding up to the camera. And if I stand on this side, the sun is shining directly into my eyes, so I might be squinting at you all, so I apologise for that. But we will be going outside soon, so you won't have to put up with that for too much longer. So what are we going to be doing today? We are going to be dealing with some of our hardy annuals. Things like these here. So these are Nigella. That is one plant that we'll be dealing with today. And then we've got Daucus, which has quite a similar leaf. And we will be planting out some cornflower. So that's the stages that these plants are at now. And I'm quite happy to put all those in the field today. Now you probably will get sick of me rabbiting on to you all about how great I think that these plug trays that I use are. The reason that I think they're great is because they're really strong plastic and I can use them year in, year out. And if you look at the bottoms there, they have a nice big hole, meaning that I can do this. Put my finger in and then I can pull out my seedlings like that without disturbing the root system. So there's no squidging of the edges of the trays, no prodding them and yanking them and, you know, giving them a nasty great big shock. It's really gentle and they just pop out like that. So this is Nigella here. As you can see, she's got a nice healthy root system going on. And if you look at the top, you might have thought that that looks a bit young to be planted out. So this is where you do always need to make sure you're checking on the root system, because if I left that in the tray for another week or so, the chances are it would become a bit too pot bound. I tend to get my plants out quite young and early into the field, within reason. I do adhere to the rules of not planting my half hardies out until the risk of frost is gone, but I do tend to get them out a little bit earlier than some people would, because I find that the root system develops a bit quicker that way and they become more established and I don't have to water them as much. I tend to find if you allow the roots to curl round too much, then they don't put out a good root system and you're constantly watering them. So if we get them in early enough, the roots will break out and look for their own water and they'll become a little bit more self-sufficient. So that's why I do that. As you'll see there with Daucus, this Daucus is going out into the fields with a little bit, shall we say, less established root system going on. But the reason that I do that with Daucus and also with Ami is because they're from the carrot family. So what will be trying to happen is this plant will be trying to produce a taproot, and I don't want to hinder that process, because if I hinder that process, then these plants won't put down a good root system and will be more susceptible to windrock. So I tend to get these in even earlier than the other varieties. As you can see there, that's probably its taproot that it's trying to develop, so it needs to really start going in the ground. So let's get these plants outside and get them in the field. Okay, so we're up here on the flower beds now. So we're in my spring zone of beds, so these will be the first beds on the flower farm to flower, and we've got all of our Nigellas popped out of their tray. Now on the rest of the flower farm I tend to burn holes into the landscape fabric which is there, but what happened in this area here is over the winter time, that when I had all the storms, it lifted the landscape fabric, so all the hardy annuals that I'd already planted out had that lifted off the top of them. And what I didn't want to have to do, you can see it flapping around over there, what I didn't want to have to do is push them all back through the holes that were in there, because it'd been too much of a faff about and I would have probably done more harm to the plant than good. So I've decided to lay these one to paths now. Now you can see to this side of me here, the fabric was down after the annual crops were in here last year, so all this is just the remnants of last year's crops, and it's all died off underneath the landscape fabric, which then leaves us with some really nice soil. And all I'm doing along this bed here is breaking it up with my hand hoe slightly on the surface, just by knocking the surface like that. And then if any little new seedlings of weeds have decided to germinate, like that one there, I'm just taking those out, because I want these plants to have a better head start than any weeds that are in here. That way, if the weeds do develop, which they will, then these have already got a head start, and the likelihood is that they will be able to smother out the other plants that are there. So let's get these in the ground and then give them an extra water. I'm not pre-watering this ground because we've had quite a lot of rain, and as you can see in my hands there, it is actually very moist, but I will water after I've planted. As I work up my way along this bed here, I'll show you the planting distance that I've got. It is basically a hand's width. I'm not doing it measuring every space, you just tend to get your eye in. And then I've got a hand's width approximately, you can see that one there's a bit closer. There you can see Nigella apart. And now, for all they look very young, these plants will bush out and they'll actually meet each other, which again should go some way to smothering out the weeds. Right, so now you join me in the next section of beds. This is where we're going to be planting our Daucus. This is how I usually grow. So I've got all my landscape matting laid down there on the floor. All of last year's annual crops that were in here got trimmed down, and then I flip the matting back over, then all of that rots down back into the ground over the winter. So then I use this. This is one of my plant stakes, and the end of this is exactly the same width as one of the holes in, I have to do one further back, don't I? In there, look, you can see, and I use this to press down to create the hole to plant into, because I can't get a trowel into there. I don't like trowels anyway, I like my hand hoe, but I can't get a tool into that hole without breaking the landscape matting up basically. So I find that my plant stakes, and or if you do what I do, which is accidentally snap your spades, then the shaft of a spade is a really good tool to have for this process, because it's just like a dibber basically, but you've made it by accident. And that serves the same purpose of putting the holes into the ground, and then we drop our Daucus in. And the landscape matting is going to cover any potential weed growth, and hopefully when they get in, they've had a head start on any of the other weeds that could have grown in the holes. So let's get our Daucus in. And the next plants that we had to plant out were our cornflower. So it's exactly the same principle as the Daucus. I'm not going to bore you by showing it again, but there we go. There's our cornflower all planted as well. I hope you've all enjoyed that episode of planting out some hardy annuals in the field. All of the plants that went in today I expect to flower at the end of June, beginning of July. None of them are particularly high feeders, so all I'm going to give them is a sprinkling of chicken manure pellets, and that'll be it. I'll water them if it gets incredibly dry, but once their roots are into the ground, I'm hoping that they should be able to look after themselves. It's very windy here, sorry. And on that note, I am actually going to put stakes in at either end of the beds, top and bottom, and then canes in between, and then I'll string netting across. Even for the Nigella, which doesn't particularly get very tall, it'll just make it grow more upright, and I tend to feel like you get longer stems if it's growing through netting, so I do that even with the Nigella. Hope you've enjoyed today's video and you found it interesting. It's nice to actually be out in the field for once. In the next episode I'm thinking of doing something pretty with flowers with you, so it'll be picking and conditioning of a nice selection of spring flowers that we have available, and how I deal with them in terms of conditioning and all their little unique qualities that they have. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time.